Religion's Influence on Government by Will Ginsberg, Rita Maladkar, and Nina Vipala.
During the Renaissance, the government was made up of many different forms. In England and other countries, the government was split up into 3 different bodies. There was the monarch, the Privy Council, and the Parliament. The monarch was the ruler of the land. He or she determined the laws of the land with the help from the Privy Council. The Privy Council was a group made up of the king or queen's tenants-in-chief, household officials, and a few close advisors. When the Privy Council began, it was a large group of advisors with around 50 people. By the time Queen Elizabeth was ruling, the number of people reduced to 11 members by 1597. Parliament was made up of the House of Lords, which consisted of high-ranking people like bishops and church officials. Parliament was also made up of the House of Commoners. This consisted of commoners or citizens of the land. Renaissance states were different. They had 3 basic forms of government: princedoms, monarchies, and republics. Princedoms were places where there is one person ruling the state. The ruler could be called a duke, count, marquis, or lord. This individual would rule the land with the support of his family. The word prince means the authority to make decisions concerning all inhabitants without check by representative body, constitution, or court. This is like a monarchy, but monarchs had more help than dukes would. Republics were the opposite of monarchies and princedoms. This form of government started during the Middle Ages when merchants took control of the commerce of the city by kicking the councils out. Large deliberative assemblies comprising of 100, 200, or more adult males, elected or chosen by lot, debated and created laws. Executive committees, often 6, 8, or a dozen men elected for 2 to 6 months, put the laws into action. Short terms of office and rules against self-succession made it possible for several hundred or more adult males to participate in government in a few years. The system of balanced and diffuse power ensured that no individual family could control the city. It was a government of balanced power and mutual suspicion. While these countries and states had a central government, the Holy Roman Empire did not. There was no central government, no unity of language, no common system of law, no sense of common loyalty among the many states within it. Over the centuries, the empire's boundaries shifted and shrank drastically. Religion had a major role in politics during the Renaissance. The church was a rival for the king's power, even over his own land. Usually, a monarch had to maintain goodwill with the church to maintain goodwill with the nobility and the commoners. And normally, the king had to grant large amounts of land to the more powerful bishops and other upperclassmen. He also had to make sure that his political actions had their approval. During the Renaissance, people started having doubts about and with the church. A monk named Martin Luther realized this, and he did something revolutionary. He posted a piece of paper called the 95 Theses on the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg. The original was written in Latin, but a translation to modern English shows all those statements Luther wanted to share. The second statement said, "Only God can give salvation, not a priest." The 95th statement read, "Let Christians experience problems if they must and overcome them, rather than live a false life based on present Catholic teaching." These show that Luther was really trying to prove that the church should not be the head of everything, even government.
The constitutional and absolute monarchies were made up of 4 different classes. The first class was called the palace or imperial institution, which was led by the sultan of the time, and this class provided leadership to the whole country and region as well as to other institutions. The second class was the military institution, which was made up of soldiers, generals, lieutenants, and other military personnel. Their job was to defend and keep order in the empire and aid the sultan in expanding the empire into foreign nations. The third institution or class was called the administrative or scribal institution, which was called the imperial treasury. They collected taxes and imperial revenues while acting like a national bank. The last and fourth class was the religious or cultural institution, which were governed by Muslim experts in religious sciences called ummas. They organized and advertised the faith, maintained and enforced religious law while helping others study interpretations for education. The coins shown were minted in Solon Orhan's name and were beneficial for the trade system and economy. The left coin represented the sultan, while the right coin was the back of the coin, which signified the rest of the empire. Orhan I created the coin because the economy needed a strong way to become stable, so he created a currency in his name. He also built various religious and educational systems along with structures because he was fascinated by the structures in his hometown of Bursa. Murat first created the Devshirme system, which enabled young Christian boys and adults to become elite soldiers for the Ottoman Empire, which encouraged many other religious people to take part in the Ottoman Empire. Suleiman I nurtured Muslims from foreign countries and united them under one force. He was a huge advocate for cultural blending, seeing as he spoke 5 different languages and studied new and old cultures. He promoted the idea that all laws should come from the Quran because people use them in their everyday life and influence them. Mehmed II created the Millet system. This gave different religious communities the freedom to live and be as they were before they were conquered, but with very few restrictions made by the Sultan when it was needed. This system was to help conflicting religious communities solve their issues and promote peace. This mostly applied to the Christians and their hatred towards Jews. After some time, the Muslims placed a tax on the Christian and Jews because they realized that their religious texts, which were the Bible and Torah, were similar to theirs, the Quran. They didn't necessarily like the idea of their text being so similar to others, so they taxed them, believing that only one religious text should be superior to others.
Feudalism has been used to refer to the oppressive hierarchy in the European society as a whole during the Middle Ages. Most accurately, feudalism more describes the specific economic, political, and social relationships between the lords and their vassals during this era. The feudal system arranged society in a strict hierarchy, having nobles or lords receive land in exchange for their loyalty and military service. The main service expected by the lords in order to receive land was serving in the military. With an agreement during times of need, lords were required by the king to have a certain amount of knights from their own family or some of their own vassals ready to fight. In return of military service, land was given to vassals by their lord. They were given smaller pieces of land by their lord to hold in fee. Instead of owing them something different, the basic unit of land was known as a fee or fief. It was big enough for a manor house, small castle, fields, woods, and whatever else was needed in order for it to be sufficient, including serfs for their work. Part of the lord's fiefs would be what vassals received as a reward in return for their service. In the feudal system, society was effectively divided into 3 scenes. Those who prayed, including members of the clergy, from cardinals and bishops to monks and village priests. They are responsible for the spiritual well-being of all Christians in Europe. Secondly, those who fought, which were the dukes, nobles, knights, and vassals. Each member, except the king, had a military obligation to his overlord and was also supposed to protect those who worked and lived on his land. And thirdly, those who worked, which were peasants, farmers, laborers, and craftsmen. They were by far the most numerous and were obligated to work for their lord who owned the land they lived on. Through inheritance and marriage, some people got huge territories, but for a long time, the Pope was the largest feudal landlord of all, controlling a large amount of land. Feudalism was such a strongly patriarchal and patrilineal system that if there was no male heir, then the overlord would decide whether to allow a daughter to inherit or whether to simply throw the survivors of the family off the land. Kings ruled by divine right, and just as vassals swore a homage to the king or overlord, when the king was crowned, he swore an oath to God, and the king ruled by the might and right of God.